get to the mic, they start dimming the lights. You start feeling alright. From Birmingham, home of the Teddy Longs, and the room is studded. More once you discover. For all of the lovers, Whitney Houston and Roman Reigns. For all of the lovers, and Mickey James and Marvin Gaye. For all of the lovers, and Sasha Banks, Janelle Monáe, Silk, Sonic, and Paige. Allow me to say, look, I just found a place, sweet escape. Every one of us, I was kinda late, so I just made it off the struggle bus. Walking by the fate, cause I know it's right in front of us. Yo, I ain't with the hate, gotta focus on what's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Steph Hardy is on the air. Had to drop a couple bars just to make you all aware. So, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. You know I go by Joe or the rest of the flow.
Hey y'all, welcome to a new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. So in this episode, I talk more about the BellaDonna Division show Genesis 2 that's taking place this Saturday at the Gadsden Mall. Get your tickets, by the way. I also talk to one of the participants in the show, Miss Shalonce Royal, who is an amazing wrestler and an accomplished singer. And I talk more about what's going on in my life in terms of wrestling, podcasting, hosting, and more. So sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite chill, positive, and passionate show, the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. All right, so I have Miss Shalonce Royal with me on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. She is an amazing wrestler. We actually had the privilege of meeting each other at the BellaDonna Division show a couple months ago, where I commentated, and she basically just blew me away with her voice and with her wrestling ability. So, Shalonce, how are you?
I'm doing well. The day is winding down. I'm winding down too, so I'm doing great.
Awesome. So I'm going to start by asking you what I ask all of my guests, and that's, when did you fall in love with wrestling?
So I'm a very different case. So I have vague memories of some things, but I remember perhaps my first meeting of wrestling is, I think my dad was flipping through channels. I think he actually was watching wrestling, and I came teetering in the room. I was really, 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 really super young. And I remember seeing, I believe, the Divas belt. I don't remember the Divas specifically. Maybe Mickey. I know I fell in love with her later, but I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh, that's so pretty. I want to do that. And then completely forgot about it. And it wasn't until maybe middle school. No, it wasn't until my late high school, early college days where I got the video game. It was one of the Raw versus SmackDowns on my PlayStation 2 and PSP. And yeah, I was a nerd. I was a gamer. And I loved the create a wrestler function. And I would spend hours, back then they didn't even have that many options, but I would spend hours making the characters and everything. And that's when I actually fell in love with wrestling. I loved going down the move list and seeing whatever wrestler you picked at that time do it. I love seeing all the girls do all the moves, because they didn't restrict the moves to just the girls and the guys, so you can see them do all the moves. But I would say that is when I absolutely fell in love with pro wrestling, through the video game.
See, that's a really cool story. And, you bring up the Divas title. And a lot of people, among certain wrestling spaces in terms of the fandom, have a tendency to sort of look down on that title. But deep down inside, I'm glad you actually said that you thought that title was pretty, because I think it's pretty too. Because I am in love with all of the women's titles. Like, it's my personal goal to collect every women's title that exists before I die.
Really?
Yeah, and I already have two. Like, I have the Raw women's title and I have the SmackDown women's title. So that is one of my biggest goals, and the Divas title is going to be there because even though a lot of people kind of look down on it, I thought it was really pretty because it's a butterfly and it's pink. I mean, it's cute, and it's still meant, it still meant a lot, you know, in terms of championship canon, and a lot of great wrestlers held that title. So I don't understand why people, you know, sort of choose to look down on it just because they feel like it looks like a toy or something like that. I mean, it kind of does, but at the same time, it's still so pretty, and it still has so much great, you know, lineage behind it that you can't really look down on it either. So I'm glad you said that. And the part about the video games too, that's a valid experience. You know, I didn't really grow up playing the wrestling video games, but I've been surrounded by people, you know, who have, and it's kind of cool how you can just go in and it seems like it gets bigger and more vast every year with all the things that you can choose and customize with how they look and all the moves that they use and everything. So I totally get that, and I think it's cool that you were open to saying that you were into video games like that.
Oh, I loved video games. So that's like my secret passion in wrestling. I want to be in a video game. The moment that happens, I'll write out my will. I'm done.
Well, I definitely believe that can happen because you're on the right track. So when did you exactly decide to pursue it as a career?
Okay, so it was during my backyard wrestling days. So I actually started in the backyard. Literally, there was a ring in the backyard and a grill on the side. So after we finished wrestling, we can go on over to the grill and get us some food. It was literally backyard. And I didn't know anything about wrestling really at the time. And it's quite an interesting story of how I even got to backyard wrestling. But anyway, I won't bore you with those details. But I got there and I'm like, I need to do research on what the freak I'm doing because they just wanted me to use my judo and jiu-jitsu skills. But I didn't know how to do judo and jiu-jitsu in wrestling because if I put you in a hole, you're not supposed to get out. You know what I mean? So you're not supposed to be okay by the end of the day. So I'm like, well, let me do some research. And the first match that I watched of recent time at that time was Asuka versus Ember Moon, and it was before Asuka got called up. So I guess it was her last match in NXT. And I was crying because the last time I watched wrestling, the women were not wrestling like that. They weren't given chances like that. I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know the backstage politics, but they just didn't have that. And to see these two women that are of minorities doing this, you know what I mean? Like, I was just like, are you kidding me? I've been gone away for so long. This is what I want to do. So seeing that match ignited a fire in me. And then at training, you know, I'm trying to do everything under the sun. You know, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm trying to do everything under the sun that I saw them do it. And one of the guys were like, well, if you really, really want to do this, then you should get training. And I'm like, I really want to do this. So one of my friends, he goes by Renegade Enforcer, was like, hey, there's a school up in Norcross. You should go. You're going to totally love it. Just give it one day. And I promise you'll love it. And I did. So from that day, I'm like, why do I want to do backyard wrestling for free when I could do pro wrestling and I can get paid and I can get closer to my dream?
Yeah, that's pretty insane that was like, you saw that match. And I remember actually watching that match and it was really good. Because Asuka was undefeated at the time. And she was the NXT Women's Champion for so long, and everybody was wondering like who was going to finally dethrone her. And Ember really made a really great case because she's such a fantastic wrestler. And I feel like that's a really great place to sort of start if you're going to see women's wrestling. NXT is one of the best places, you know, to see the best in women's wrestling, period. And the idea that you saw that, you know, and it resonated with you so well, that is really cool. And you mentioned that you had jiu-jitsu training?
Yes. So before I did wrestling, it's very weird. So I know a lot of people out there can relate, but you know when you have like a relationship going on and it's kind of like fizzling, so you're trying to find things you could do together to kind of save it. Well, at the time, back in the day, a long time ago, I was engaged and it was fizzling out. And he's like, well, why don't you come to training with me? And I don't know if he really thought that I was going to do it because he was doing judo and jiu-jitsu, but I'm like, sure, I'll go. And so I go up in there, get my little white belt, got my gi on, and I'm all excited because I get to spend time with my future hubby. And I killed it. I loved it. And eventually he couldn't do it anymore. And I stuck with it until the place closed. And that's where I got like my start. Like I technically never advanced past white belt because the place ended up closing. But I ended up going to like my first tournament and placing second. Ooh. So, you know, I'm just not bragging, but, you know, just giving myself a little cool points because not many people know that. I don't really talk about it that much.
That's cool because it's like we actually have a karate place like in my neighborhood here in Alabama, and I live in Fairfield / Birmingham over here, which is like in the central part, like right in the middle of Alabama. And it's just, I find it really fascinating that people actually can either go all in on doing that type of fighting style, or they just do it a little bit like in their childhood and then they really just don't really do it that much anymore. Like, that's crazy. And I think that's really cool though, because it conditioned you and it prepared you, you know, for your wrestling career and stuff. And that's amazing. That's really impressive. Like, I wish I had the time to learn how to do combat stuff, but that's another topic. That's another topic. So after you decided to pursue it as a career full on, did you have a good support system, or did you face any obstacles along the way from people who didn't quite understand why you wanted to pursue it?
Multiple obstacles, so everyone is like, oh, Shalondra, you're going to be a singer. I went to school for music. I graduated for college for music. I was on my way to grad school for music. I toured in Italy. I sang in Italy, in South Korea, and people expect me to be a good opera singer or at least a teacher. And I wanted that too. So when I started posting on my Facebook about being a professional wrestler or trying to be a professional wrestler, everyone had like a double take, like, what is she doing? Why is she beating up people? Like, she should be singing for the guys, and yet she's beating people up for the guys. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, it's what I like to do. In fact, I like to beat people up and sing at the same time. So I'm mashing it together, and people did not like that. In fact, some of my mentors stopped answering my messages. Some of them unfriended me on Facebook. Some of them just they didn't care. They're like, you know, a lot of them suffered through college and everything with me, and I get where they're coming from. They suffered through college with me because college wasn't easy for me due to personal reasons. So I understand when they're like, we got her through and she seems like she's throwing it all away, but I'm really not trying to. But because of that, my mom, she supports now because she believes she's gonna meet The Rock through me. So she accepted me wrestling. I don't want to break it to her that I don't know The Rock personally. I'm not sure I will ever get to meet him personally. Hopefully I will. But if she meets him, then she'll fully accept what I do. My father doesn't really know what I do. And there are some friends that just distance themselves. But along the way, I have made a lot of friends and made a lot of mentors too. It just sucks because it's wrestling. Like, I miss my people of music. I miss, people, my gamer friends and things like that. So it's been pretty lonely. It's been a struggle. It's been pretty lonely, but I'm still doing it.
See, it's funny because when we first met and you told me that you had went to school for music, that was one of the things that we connected on because so did I. And it's just, I was singing like all throughout middle school, elementary school, and church, and all of the above. And I just thought that, well, if I'm going to do this and if I'm doing this continuously all the time, then maybe I should major in it, because a lot of my friends were in choir. I was in 2 choirs in college. I don't know how I did it, but I did. But I was literally, hanging out with all of these friends. And I just decided, well, I'm going to do music, because I had done a musical that summer after my freshman year. and I'm going to do music. And I enjoyed the voice lessons component of it because I loved, my voice just getting better and better. Even though I said I was going to be an alto forever, that didn't last long.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I became a soprano, fairly quickly. And it's just, after I graduated, and it was a little bit of a struggle, with all my classes and stuff, because theory was something that I struggled with. Music theory was something that I struggled so hard with because I do not have a math and science brain at all. I am a creative word type, listening to music and learning it by hearing type of person. And that was a bit of a struggle, but I did it and I got my degree. But after I came home, there really wasn't a lot that I could do in terms of singing. But outside of the realms of, being at church and stuff, there really wasn't a whole lot that I could do. And anything that I would try to do, I would always get rejected from. So it was hard to sort of put that together, while also working and trying to survive and all of that stuff. So, but the thing is, the thing that kept me going was the fact that I knew that I had my voice for a reason, and that I was going to use it, whenever the time was right. And it wasn't just all about, gaining all of the accolades or doing what I saw other people doing. Because sometimes when you see a lot of your friends doing a thing, you feel like, oh, well, I should be doing that thing too. But, there might just be something a whole lot more different that you're sort of burying beneath, and other gifts that you have that deserve your time, and deserve your love just as much as this one thing. And doing this podcast and talking about wrestling has helped with that, because I've always loved wrestling, but I never thought that anybody would listen to me talk about it. But, it's happened. I'm doing all these things. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to so many different other people. And I'm realizing, more and more that, one part of my voice can be used, but then another part can be used too. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I think, and a lot of my friends have been pretty supportive of it, simply because they really see that I'm, passionate about it. And as long as I'm doing what makes me happy, that's really all that matters to them. Because a lot of my friends, especially a lot of my music friends, they know about wrestling, but, from like the surface level, but don't know all about it. But they find it fascinating that I do. So, they're really supportive of that. And I'm really glad that you actually, found a community that actually does, support you in that. Because really, ultimately, wrestling is a family. Even though we may get caught up in a whole lot of crazy stuff and arguments and all that other stuff, we're ultimately a family because we love this one thing, and this one thing gives us, a couple of different things. We all take different things out of wrestling, but at the end of the day, we're all a family. And I'm really glad that you were able to sort of press through all of those obstacles, and still want to pursue this dream because it's valid to you, and you are able to create, this family outside of that as well. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad you did that for yourself. And
thank you.
And it's just really cool. Like, I couldn't even believe, how our journeys just kind of linked up like that. And I was just like,
I know.
Really? So as you were talking about singing, like what was the moment that sort of clicked for you when you decided to connect both of those things together in terms of music and wrestling, like singing and, wrestling at the same time? Because that's a very unique character, I should say. Because I think there's only been one person to really do it, but she was singing badly. So that was Jillian Hall. Like, she was singing badly while wrestling, and that was really it. But you sing really well and wrestle. So how did that come about?
So I struggled with it for a while because I just thought if I could emulate music in a way, I could just be like music. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to sing and do things at the same time, like sing and wrestle at the same time, because girl was getting tired. Until one day I just tried it and I'm like, oh, I can do this. But I knew, so like when I was first coming up with a gimmick, I had two. I had the Royal Flush, which I just used my regular name, Shalonce Royal or Shalonce Royal. And cause my last name, like, cause that's my real last name. So I'm like, who's gonna take this away from me? It's on my birth certificate. So, and that's when I came up with like that gear. It was like it had like a card theme, a black and red and white card theme. And then I'm like, well, that's cute, but it's not making me stand out. It's just people will look at my gear, like, oh, that's cool, but it just didn't really have much of a personality. Especially for someone starting out, where people nowadays, you kind of have something to make people pay attention to you. You either got to look really, really good, or you got to be really, really strong, or you have to have a unique talent, or you have to have the over-the-top gimmick. But me, I was just right there in the middle, and just, oh, she's cute, let's beat her up, you know? Mm-hmm. So then it actually, it was my gear maker, Sandra. She was like, we need to redo all this. She didn't make the first gear. She made the purple and gold one and the red and black and white one that I debuted at AW. But she was like, people aren't gonna know. Like, they're not gonna know. So we need to put it on your gear so that they'll know. And I think you should go with music. So it was actually Sandra that kind of gave me the little push to go ahead and do the music theme. And she's like, not many people are singing. It's something that's gonna make you stand out. So even with that, I was still a little bit like reserved with it, because I would sing maybe in my entrance, and then in my comeback I would sing, but it felt more like a banshee shriek. So I'm like, so I battled. I was going to change my gimmick to kind of fit one of my favorite Mortal Kombat characters, Sindel. Mm-hmm. I was going to do that. And I'm just like, but no, like, I didn't go to school and suffer through college and do all this for no reason. People are gonna hear me sing, because I still have student loans, people. So as long as they're there, I'm going to, student loans. So I'm gonna use this. So during quarantine, I had a lot of time to myself to think, and it sucks because it's so recent that it took me to get here. But I started rethinking. I'm like, why didn't I stand out on AEW Dark? Why didn't I stand out? Like, why do people just book me to be the baby face and to just get beat and make their person look good? They know that I'm a good wrestler. They at least know that my technique is there, like my basics are there. They know that I can sell and do whatever. But what is not making me pop? And thus, Shalonce was born. Shalonce actually was already born in South Korea, but I had shelved her away. But now I'm like, you know what? I am a musical diva. I can actually sing. I have a degree in it, and I can sing multiple styles, and people are going to need to hear it. And that's birth Shalonce. And now I just sing, and it took me, it was actually a recent match against Twisted Trixie. It was my birthday tour where I realized that I can actually sing and beat people up at the same time. I wanted her to sing happy birthday to me, and she wouldn't sing happy birthday to me. So I'm like, fine, I'll sing it myself. So I started singing it myself and beating her up, because she should be the one that sings it. So I complete the whole song while beating her up. And I'm like, I got something here. I have something here. And I didn't get winded. I didn't get tired. And I could do that. So I'm like, you know what? Now I'm just going to sing and beat people up, because I like the sound of my own voice, and I got to win. So...
Yeah, and I imagine it sort of gives you a power boost, because I know when I would sing, it sort of like, it makes me feel like I have like a superpower. Like, it sort of boosts like your, like the happiness in your mind. So I can only imagine how much you're gassing yourself up during a match while you're singing too. Like, that's gotta be like wild. That is so cool. And then the fact that your last name is Royal too, like, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's kind of like how my last name is Hardy. And I remember when I first met Casey, who's one of the owners of the BellaDonna Division, and shout out to her, I told her that Hardy was actually my last name. And she was just like, so is that really your last name, or is that something that you kind of, picked up along the way? And I was like, no, like, that's really it. Like, on my birth certificate, my last name is Hardy, like the Hardy Boys. Because she was just like, okay, because if it's not real, then you'll just have just change it. But I was like, no, like, that's really it. Like,
Why would you have to change it if it wasn't real?
I mean, I think that was the way. I forgot exactly why, because in those messages I was just panicking or whatever. But it's just when your last name is Hardy, it's like fans either when you're in a fan group or whatever, and people are like, whoa, like that's really your last name, like full on, yeah. And I embraced that. So, okay. But then you never know, because you could get reached with like copyright or something like that. Like, I don't know who owns that in wrestling, or if the Hardy Boys themselves actually own it. But it's just, I guess sometimes because you really just don't want to run into any legal troubles, you know?
Right.
But, you know, Hardy is it's not really, really common, but it's common enough, you know? Yeah. So yeah, that's actually my last name. And then the fact to tie in the fact that my name is Stephanie too. Like, there's so many Stephanies in wrestling, connected to wrestlers. It's insane. But I told Casey, like, my parents didn't do that on purpose. I promise they didn't. That's just how it turned out. They named me Stephanie. And it just so happened I fell in love with wrestling later on. But it's okay though. So as a trainee, you know, as you're training in wrestling, you know, in terms of like, did you train outside of the Nightmare Factory first? Like, did you get any training outside of there first, or was that your first like wrestling school that you went to?
So technically I got a little bit of a tiny incy taste of training in backyard wrestling. That's where I technically learned to bump and to hit the ropes in a sort. And so at the time, it wasn't Nightmare Factory. At the time, it was called One Fall Power Factory. And I went over there and I just kind of redid everything. But I was a little bit ahead of the curve because I wasn't afraid of bumping. I wasn't afraid of running the ropes. I was so happy to be involved. I wanted to do every drill that they did. And it helped that I have an athletic background too. So I just kind of picked up really quickly at One Fall / Nightmare Factory.
Okay. So what have been some of the greatest lessons that you've learned, you know, as you matriculated through that training?
Don't take anything personally. Just do it. Like, don't be if you're going to do a drill, commit to it. Like, you know, a lot of times you just do it to get through the moves or to get through the drill, but like, this is your time to like practice and really make it muscle memory, so that what you do in their matches. And be a team player in the sense of knowing that you need to take care of the person in the ring with you, and get involved, take initiative, do what you have to do. And also, yes, worry about, you know, your colleagues if you want, but also worry about yourself. Like, this is a business and it's not always kind. It's not always easy. Appreciate those that are kind to you and supportive of you, but understand that not everyone's going to be that way.
Definitely. Those are really good lessons that you have learned. And what is the facility like? Because I've seen like pictures, but I've never seen like a holistic sort of view of what the Nightmare Factory really looks like. Like, what is that facility like, and how does it sort of, and what does it have that sort of helps facilitate the future of wrestling?
So it has like a full gym. NFL players also train there at a gym as well.
Oh, wow.
It has 4 wrestling rings. It probably has more, but we don't always have them all up. So there's like 4 up wrestling rings. And then other things that a gym would have, bathroom. I think it also has a cryo lab, but that's something that's like that we share with the NFL trainers and things like that. But as far as us, we have like a full facilitated gym and 4 wrestling rings and a nice open like space. So it's pretty nice.
Okay, cool. So you had mentioned that you had been a singer, you know, and you were pursuing it as well. So you were basically doing singing like before you started wrestling. So we've sort of established that. So if you were to pursue a music career, how would you balance that out with wrestling? Or had you ever thought about that before?
Yes, I thought about it. I just like, so my goal is, once I get financially set, because the struggle is real, but far enough into my wrestling career, I would want to create my own studio, or maybe collab with someone else's studio, because I'm all about like helping, you know, like sometimes you got to help each other. But ideally I would want my own studio, and I would record my own stuff, or I would pick back up like classical lessons again, and hope, you know, do like a few performances like I used to perform at weddings and funerals, or just put on recitals, you know. But instead maybe like put on recitals for benefits of others, you know, because before I would do it for myself to raise money, but maybe, you know, perform for a cause. There's things like that alongside wrestling. So I kind of have like a few plans, and my goal is to be so successful with wrestling that people associate me with music, just in general, that they expect an album, they expect an EP, they expect an instrumental, they expect these things.
So basically you're gonna be like, you want to be like Lillian Garcia times 10.
Yes.
Because that's the first person I think of when it comes to like music and having a music career, and then also having her wrestling career, though she was an announcer for years,
right,
and now she's a podcast host and stuff. It's just, whenever I remember the first time I found out she could sing, I was so excited, because I was just like, oh my god, so you can sing and you can announce? Okay, girl. So that's kind of what that reminds me of, and I think that's a pretty good goal to have your own studio and make music and do the whole both and thing, and not just one thing at a time. So what are your favorite types of genres to sing?
To sing, I would say classical. I know people are like, ew, like classical music. I mean, because that's what I'm most comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And just certain pop songs. Like, I don't know how to explain, because I don't know like what genre it fits in, but I don't know. But I mean, obviously I love to sing classical. I just love to sing pop. I love to sing K-pop as well, but I like to listen to it more than sing it. But I like to sing. I just like to sing whatever like my soul like resonates with at the time.
Okay, cool. So I know one of my favorite things that I used to love to sing. I used to love singing, like, even though it was hard, I loved singing German Lieder.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I loved singing songs in German, because that was the easiest language for me to grasp, along with other African songs too. Like, those were kind of easier for me to do. Like, but
really?
French used to kick my butt.
Oh yeah, French, I sucked at it. There was one time I really wanted them, like my recital, like my finishing recital, I was like, take the song away. No, I don't want to do it. And they're like, well, you had to have like songs in different languages on their on the repertoire. Yes. And I was already limited in what I was singing anyway. So she was like, you have to have this. German kicked my butt too. Like German, because I'll be spinning all over the place singing it. And Italian was my favorite. It was the easiest.
Oh, that's my favorite too. I loved Italian. Anytime any one of my voice teachers gave me Italian, like, I would kick its butt. Oh my god, I loved Italian, and I loved German. But French, that was not my favorite. But I loved singing African stuff too, because in the gospel choir that I was in college, our professor, Dr. Bullock, shout out to her, she's my hero. She would do study abroad trips in she would go to Ghana, and I want to say she went to Nigeria, maybe. I can't remember the other country. But she would come back and learn these African songs and teach them to us. And oh my God, we would learn these songs, you know, and learn the syllables and the letters and all of that. And it was just the greatest thing. And you wind up keeping them in your mind forever. Like, wow. I haven't forgotten those songs, you know, to this day. And it's just, those were my favorite songs to sing, and because it just felt like I was like closer to my heritage in that way. So like, I loved doing that as well. But my favorite genres to sing right now are like gospel and R&B, because that's just that's my favorite thing. But I do like to sing classic rock too, but I don't really tell people that.
Yes. Yeah, we don't say that out loud.
Yes, I've never really said that out loud. Oh my god, like classic rock is so cool, but a lot of I just feel like a lot of people really don't take that into account for real. But classic rock is amazing because you're able to sort of scream a little bit, and that's just awesome. So so you mentioned that Miss Sandra gave you the idea.
Sorry, I got gnats right now.
It's okay. You mentioned the idea that Miss Sandra actually gave you the idea to sort of have this singing character with that. And shout outs to her, because she's like an OG, like in wrestling. Like, she's been making gear, for the gods forever. Like, that had to be the most amazing experience. And I would love to have her on my show.
She's amazing.
Oh my god, I would love to have her on my show, but I'm just not sure. So how did the pandemic sort of affect your career? Because I know it affected, all of us, and it's still affecting us now because, it's deciding to spread off and, into different variants and stuff like that, like Loki. But so how did that, affect your career, and how were you able to sort of pivot around it?
It's kind of twofold. So like, I feel like it really hindered my career because in the beginning of the year, I started having so many bookings. I was becoming more confident, at least in my ring work, and I was just so ready. It also was turning heel at certain places for the very first time. I was always a baby face. People just love beating me up, and the crowd loves like cheering for me to like win. But then I finally had the courage to go heel, and I loved it. I got out my grievances. Being a heel in the business as well, which I'm not sure if a lot of people go by this, but I know we're taught like typically the heel is usually either the more experienced or the ones that help call the match or guide the match through. So of course I'm just like, super Shalondra can do it now. I'm like, I got this. I'm in the game for a little bit and know what I'm doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I thought I knew what I was doing. So when the pandemic hit, it shut everything down, like everything. And now I had all these bookings that are just canceling left and right. And for me, for someone that would maybe do like a show once a month, that was big to be able to have all my weekends booked. And now they're not. But I'm kind of glad that the pandemic happened. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm not glad it happened, but I'm saying for me, I'm glad what happened for me during it was a wake-up call on a lot of fronts in my life, a lot. But in particular with wrestling, it helped me realize that I needed to take my wrestling gimmick to the next level. It was cute and all, but I really wasn't doing things to stand out. Like I was just a wrestler. I wasn't really a wrestler. Am I making sense? Like there was a wrestler, but there wasn't any substance to it. It's just like, oh, she did a good job. But people wouldn't really remember me by the end of the night other than, oh, she's cute, or I liked her wig, or her butt was big. That's all I would hear. But I wanted people to talk about me enough to where other bookers want to book me. And I discovered that. And so while I'm still not 100% there with my gimmick, I feel like, and I say this all the time, like some people felt so constricted during the quarantine that it was like a cage for them. But for me, it was like a cocoon. I feel like I transformed. I learned so much about myself, and I had a lot of time to watch wrestling finally and like really study. And I don't regret that time. I hate that a pandemic had to happen, but I tried to turn it to where it would be more beneficial to me should I survive it.
Yeah, like I feel like it sort of tested a lot of people in terms of who they were, because for a long time, something that a lot of people talk about on social media is the fact that we sort of use what we do on a regular basis as a coping mechanism for the things that we try to cover up or ignore. And I feel like once the pandemic slowed everything down and shut everything down, it made us sort of have to really come to grips with what was actually happening to us and what we've been covering up for so long and how we want to move forward. Right. And, you know, and a lot of the people in wrestling that I have talked to, you know, may do by, you know, selling merchandise and sort of retooling, you know, who they were as people and also as characters as well. And just, you know, sort of like you said, because, you know, went inside of a cocoon and then are, you know, slowly breaking out or breaking out completely and having those butterfly wings, you know. And that's always a good thing because, you know, hardships come to test us and evolve us and help us get better. So that's really what this is doing ultimately. Even though you hate, you know, the price that it has to come to, with the loss of so many people, but at the same time, it helps us to sort of really take stock in what we have, you know, and be grateful because it could all be gone at some point. So I'm glad that you're able to sort of, you know, take that time to evolve and get better and, you know, be the character that you were able to find. Your journey reminds me a lot of Sasha Banks' journey. Like,
really?
Because she said in an interview, you know, that when she was wrestling, a lot of people, at first when she got to NXT, she really didn't have that much of a character at first, but it was Dusty Rhodes, ironically, who helped her to unlock the sort of boss character that she also took from her cousin Snoop Dogg, a little bit, because everybody called him the boss and everything. So she decided to take that, and then he was the one to sort of give her that extra push, because she was always a great wrestler because she had been wrestling in the indies and training and all that. But on NXT television, you know, she was just this smiley bubbly girl, and there was something else within her that she needed to push her forward, and that's how the boss was born, and that's how she is, you know, how she's as successful as she is now. And that's kind of what that reminds me of.
Funny you say that. I resonate so much with Sasha. I really do. Yeah, I would love to meet her one day.
Oh my God, me too. She's the GOAT to me. Like, she's the greatest. She's the greatest women's wrestler alive right now. Like, I will die on that hill. Like, to me, I love her so much. I love almost all the women wrestlers, but she's my favorite. Like her and Bianca Belair. But yeah. So since you've been going through and getting bookings and stuff for these independent wrestling shows, like, how has the independent wrestling scene sort of treated you, and do you have like a fan base?
I feel like I have a small little fan base. As far as the indie scene treated me, I don't know if it's me or them, but I don't know. I find it's probably me. It's sometimes I feel like it's treated me weird. Like, nowadays, now more promoters are opening up about like how many women's matches they have or what. But like before, like everything came out about like basically the women's movement, it would be like, well, they have their staple women. So it's like trying to have them take a chance on you, like, hey, I know you have your favorite girl here, but I would like to wrestle too, or I would like to go here. So it's like that, or some promoters not thinking you're worth it. And I know a lot of girls go through that. A lot of them, they're like, oh, that's your fee, are you worth it? No. Or where have you been, what have you done? But I think a lot of women's wrestlers have that struggle. But I've had a lot of good things too. So the indie scene is rough. It's rough, and I'm still learning how to navigate it. But I have a lot of great memories, and I have a lot of places that have taken a chance on me or believe in me or help me. So I'm extremely loyal to those places, and I can't wait to venture out more.
Yeah, it's so funny like what you said about women's wrestlers sort of having to negotiate their pay. To a degree, that sort of ties into my next question, of how you feel about the state of women's wrestling, even in the indies or on the mainstream, and in terms of what's good that's happening with it, and what do you think could be improved upon. And I find that the value of that's being placed on women's wrestling, it's growing and it's getting better, but then there's the underlying belief that maybe it still doesn't, that people still don't really want to see it as much as the men's wrestling, and that's a problem. So could you expound on what you think should be better in terms of women's wrestling and what is going on that's really good for women's wrestling right now from your perspective?
Well, keep in mind, I've only been in this business for a whole 2 seconds. So what I'm saying is just strictly my opinion. It's strictly what I've observed. I understand both sides of the coin. So in one essence, I want women to be taken more seriously. We put our bodies on the line out there just like the dudes do. But I understand also that a lot of people feel that if women are going to main event, semi-main, or if they want better pay, or they want these things, they need to know how to wrestle. And there's a lot of women wrestlers out there that are okay. You know, like I'm okay. You know, some of us are okay. But there are some that are like killing it, you know? And so they're like, well, if you're killing it, then yes, we want to push you and do this stuff. But if you're okay, then they don't want you to necessarily be vocal. However, I have witnessed a lot of unfair things that have happened to certain women. I feel like because times are changing and because, how do I say this? I feel that women should be taken more seriously because the time now calls for it. You know, it would be nice to not just have one women's match on a show, which is the stereotypical thing. It'll be nice to have maybe 2, heck, maybe even 3. But for some people, that's asking so much. But another thing I think that I hear all the time, and I'm not quite sure how to fix this, I hear promoters say like, well, women want too much, so therefore we can only afford to have one match on the card. So I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, because I would never tell someone to lower their rate just to be on a show. Like, your rate is your rate. But that's talk that I hear. But as a woman, regardless of the rules or the things that I hear being said, I do believe that we deserve more chances. I'm so proud of the women's movement. I'm so proud of women standing up and going for it, and because we can put on quality matches too. You know, we can bring people in seats. But we need a chance, and not just, oh, I just got 2 girls on the card. Y'all don't really have a story. We just need you to wrestle because we just need to have a girls match on there, which I've encountered a lot. So I don't know if that really answered your question. It's one of those things where I can ramble about all day and then finally get to my point. But overall, I'm proud of what the women are doing. I don't want the women to give up. I want promoters to give women more chances, or at least learn how to book us. Because that's another thing. There are some promoters that have asked me, even, they're like, well, what can this person do? What can this person do? They throw women in like a multi-man just to have a women's match. And I'm like, some of these girls don't even know how to do these matches or even want to do these matches. Have a singles, have a this, have a that. Like, they get creative with coming up with all these types of matches for the guys, and then just don't even think about story or anything with the ladies. So while yes, I hear all the complaints that happen with promoters and behind the scenes, but can you at least give us better storylines? Can you at least give us better matches? At least.
Yeah, I think that is something that really does need to be improved on, is more women. I believe that women should be writing stories for women. And I feel like those storylines would be more nuanced if, from a female perspective, we could write, you know, more nuanced stories that way and that requires more inclusion behind the scenes of women of all different backgrounds. And you see women like Mickie James, and you see women like Maria Kanellis Bennett, you know, making those changes with Ring of Honor and with NWA, and even with Casey with the BellaDonna Division, you know, making those changes and actually having women be a part of the entire show. And
or Flawless, like even Flawless.
Yeah,
Kenzie
Flawless
Page,
Shine, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
because sorry.
Yeah, you see, it's okay. You see stuff like that, and it sort of inspires you. You know, I'm sure it inspires a lot of people to sort of want to do better. I hope it does, and actually have more inclusion when it comes to stuff like that. But there's always, work to be done from that, vein. So I feel like the future for women's wrestling is bright, but like I said, there's always more improvements that can be made.
Yeah, definitely.
But I feel like as long as women are able to tell the stories of women, then that would make it like 10 times better. Definitely. So in speaking about the BellaDonna division, you having participated in Genesis 1, and wrestling in your match against Zoe Sky, what would you say, what different things are you going to bring to Genesis 2, which is taking place next weekend, or by the time this interview is out this coming Saturday? So what different things are you going to add when you come to Genesis this time?
It depends on my opponent. I adjust to my opponent, because Shalonce is the show. Like, it is what it is. Shalonce is the show. Shalonce is the reason why people come to the BellaDonna division. So I don't really have to change up anything, because they already know. But I know that not every opponent is the same, so I'll just adjust accordingly.
Okay, that's a good answer. So how did you feel being a part of that show, though? Because I know for me, this was the first independent wrestling show I had ever been to in my life. And then the fact that I was able to even participate in it as a commentary, person, that meant a lot to me personally, as a fan, because I was always sort of, when it comes to wrestling, you're sort of on the outside looking in because you're watching all these people on screen. But to be a part of it, it's like, and to see so many of you, doing this on a high level and being able to commentate and tell the story for it just meant a whole lot to me. So how did it make you feel to be a part of that, and then to be a part of, the first all-female promotion, like, in Alabama, period? Like, how did that make you feel?
It didn't hit me really at the time until I realized, like, it was the first female promotion in Alabama, and especially in this stretch down here in the South. It felt great, but at the time I didn't. At the time I'm like, I'm here to wrestle, I'm here to do this, and then afterwards I'm like, wow, we really did that, and we're gonna keep doing that. But it felt comfortable, because while in the locker rooms where there's mainly men, I mean, it's not like I'm uncomfortable, but I know sometimes there are uncomfortable situations, like there's not an additional dressing room, so you have to either get dressed in the bathroom, or you have to kind of figure out how to finagle your stuff without being seen. But here, it just was such a comfort to know, like, I don't have to worry about, someone that shouldn't see my girly part seeing my girly part. So where, like, I could just walk around freely. I'm not saying I walked around naked, but like maybe I wasn't completely dressed, or, people, you could occupy the space and not have to worry about the people like a long line for the bathroom or something, because everybody's trying to change, And I mean, the locker room was accommodating for women. I mean, there was mirrors and like little like bins where there's like feminine products and other things like that, hair ties, stuff, the things that we often forget or we know we need, and things happen. So it was literally a locker room for women, and it felt amazing. So that is one of the reasons why I say, like, oh wow, it didn't really hit me, because it felt like a professional setting. I came there to work, but because it went so smooth, my brain didn't think about it. But now that I think about it, it felt great. It was great. I can't wait.
Yeah, it really was great. Like, it was so comfortable. I couldn't even believe I was even back there. Like, if you had told me years ago that I was going to be in a locker room with women's wrestling superheroes like y'all, Like, I would have said, nah, no way. But being back there with y'all, and you know, it felt very comfortable for me. It felt like a sleepover, low-key. Like when you were a child, you know, you would go over your friend's house for a birthday party, and then they would have a sleepover, and we're all talking about, you know, girly things. Except we're not talking about girly things, really. We're talking about wrestling, but then at the same time, you feel it's that comfort there, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how good it felt, and it was really nice, and I can't wait to go back. Like, I'm really excited. And shout out to Casey again for putting together such a great show. And I feel like this show, Genesis 2, is going to be really great as well, because I mean, the talent we have, there's Amber Rodriguez, like so many women. I'm so pumped. Maserati, Lazarus, like just so many great women. I'm so excited. So who has been your favorite opponent to face so far?
Oh, that's such a hard question. Because like all my opponents, I walk away with something. Oh, this is so hard. My favorite. So let me just say this. I haven't had a match where I walked away and I didn't like the person. So I haven't had one of those. But one that's coming to mind right now is Marina Tucker. We faced each other last month in Sanford, Florida. Marina I love her. I'm supposed to hate her, but I love her. She's so cool. I love her gimmick. She's so chill. She's professional. She's willing to try anything. And I don't like to just individualize it, because all my opponents like have been that way so far. But I would have to say, if I had to choose one, Marina and Nyla Rose. Those would be my two.
Okay, so you faced the former AEW Women's Champion before.
Yes.
Cool. I've had a lot of guests who've said, you know, many great things about her.
Yeah, she was my first dark match. Well, my actual only dark match as of yet on AEW. I faced her. I tagged with Shazza McKenzie and versus Nyla and Leva, even though Leva was technically never tagged in. And it was great. I got beat up horrendously by Nyla. She annihilated me.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure she did, but I'm glad that you had that experience. So do you have any dream opponents, people you haven't faced yet? Who do you
dream opponents? That this changes like on a weekly basis. So Sasha Banks, number one. Bianca, number two. I mean, I think those are like a given.
Yeah.
One that people probably wouldn't expect is okay. So two that people probably wouldn't expect is Anna Jay. I want to face her again now that she's, you know, elevated. Charlotte Flair.
Mm-hmm.
I know people would, and Mickie James.
Those are some great opponents there. Like, it's like you have all of the GOATs, and then you have, you know, rising stars like Anna Jay, like that.
Yeah, because we trained together. It's one of those nostalgia things. Like, Anna and I started at One Fall, aka the Nightmare Factory, around the same time. I think she was there maybe like a few weeks before me. And she, you know, we were like the only two consistent women at one point. And so we kind of saw each other grow. We got a lot of ring time together. And she was signed with almost, I think maybe 5 matches under her belt, maybe. And I was like 3 of them. So 2 or 3 of them, you know. So it's like, I think it would be an emotional moment should I get to face her again, because I'm like, we started out together. And yes, she got a contract and everything before me. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I can see you.
She got okay. So she got there before me, but it doesn't mean that I won't get there. I'm super happy for her and super proud for her. And I just want to face her again on a higher level than we once were. And I think that moment will probably like make me cry.
Yeah, definitely. You have that bond, and I feel like that would be an emotional moment if you guys were to lock up together and link up together. Would you want to face Britt Baker, DMD, though?
No, I don't want her hands in my mouth. This is my instrument. My instrument. And the moment she goes, I'm like, I will bite with all my might. But no, especially while I'm in the midst of singing and she puts her hands in my mouth. Oh
no. So I asked you about your dream opponents. So who are your top 5 wrestlers, male, female, or otherwise?
Oh, this is so difficult. Top 5 wrestlers. So people are gonna hate me because like I didn't watch wrestling for a huge chunk of my life. I didn't have cable. My top 5 wrestlers. So I'm gonna give these based off of like my little 2 cents of growing up. So one, not in no particular order.
Yeah.
One is John Morrison. So he's one of the wrestlers that I noticed when I was really young. And I'll never forget, I only watched one match with him, and it was with him against old school Drew McIntyre. And I did not like Drew because I was like, his hair is horrible. He's ugly. I don't think he's ugly, but I was a kid, so I'm like, ew. But John Morrison, you could not tell me I wasn't gonna marry him. Respect to his wife and stuff. But when I was younger, I was like, that's my husband. His hair looks amazing, even after he wrestles. His pants are shiny. So I would have to say, but all due respect, I really always thought he was a good wrestler. So John Morrison for superficial reasons. Ricky Steamboat, because I studied and continuously studying a lot of his styles because I just don't see it enough these days. Much people are gonna say Charlotte Flair because she's. A lot of people will always say she's where she is because of her father, and that is true in a sense. But I think she also works for it. She looks great. She put in quality matches. Rhea Ripley is also a dream match. I forgot, but Rhea Ripley. I love Rhea. Yeah. So I include her in there, and I just say Sasha. I mean, did I say Sasha already?
Yeah, you did, but it's okay if you want to. If you want to repeat the GOAT's name, repeat the GOAT's name. I mean, God.
But yeah, but that's so hard. There's a lot of wrestlers, but yeah, I would name those.
Okay, that's a pretty solid list, I mean, because I know I ask people that question, but if somebody were to ask me that question, I would kind of freeze up too, because mine changes all the time. So there's no pressure. It's okay. So if you were given the opportunity to sign for a major mainstream company like AEW or WWE or Impact, would you go for it? And which one would you go for, if I can ask it?
I would. But I don't know who. I guess because a lot of people would say, well, AEW, obviously, because I've been on there about 3 times, but I just want to wrestle. So whatever wrestling company wants me and would treat me well, if I had to choose, it would either be NWA or AEW.
Okay.
But if the WWE came knocking, I'm not gonna say no. Like if Impact is like, hey, I'm not gonna be saying no. But if I had to choose, and those were the 2 options that I only had because the other 2 weren't on the table, then the others weren't on the table, and those were, then I would go with those 2.
Okay, and those are 2 pretty solid choices. The Knockouts division is really great, and then with AEW, their women's division is pretty, stellar as well. So you can't really go wrong with either one of those choices, to be completely honest. And I hope that in the future I will see more of you, one day on either one of those shows and I'd be like, yeah, I know her. So that would be cool. So what does the future hold for Shalonce?
The future is very bright for me. I'm just taking it day by day. Like I want to get signed. My goal is to be signed within the next 2 years. So I got a lot of work to do. I feel like I have to set that goal. Otherwise, I'm just gonna keep going through the motions, which is very easy being a wrestler, that's self-supporting yourself, and everyone is like, you should be an opera singer, not a wrestler. So my goal is to be signed to a company the next 2 years, to be able to at least have wrestled in 10 to 15 additional states than I am now. And I just want to make a splash on the wrestling community because I think everybody should be checking for Shalonce. I work hard, I train hard, I am multi-talented, I'm a Jackie of all trades. I feel like I can bring the star power to any show that I'm on. I just need people to go ahead and book me.
Okay, well, Shalonce Royal, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. So take this time to sort of put yourself over and tell people where they can find you on social media, and also tell people what you've got going on. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I am on Instagram and Twitter at Shalonce_Royal. I'm on YouTube at The Fighting Siren, but I'm sure if you type in Shalonce, you'll find that channel eventually. I'm on TikTok with Shalonce Royal. I'm Twitch, Shalonce Royal. What else do I do? I feel like I do a lot of things. But yeah, you can find me there. Currently, yes, on Saturday when this comes out, I would have already wrestled in Alabama on the 14th. On the 15th, I'm at GIPW. I wrestle for the BellaDonna Division coming up so I'll be at Flawless on the 20th. I'll be on the 21st, I'll be at the BellaDonna Division, and the 21st, I will be at Pro Wrestling Action, which are all great, amazing promotions. So I highly recommend people check those out. Continue to be on the lookout for things from the Nightmare Factory, and you just never know. Continue to support and say, hey, we want to see Shalonce on AEW. Support.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast and gracing us with your presence. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay! Okay, so I was sitting with my friends one day and they asked me, Stephanie, how do you record your podcast? And I said, with the Anchor app on my phone. And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. It is absolutely free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and your computer. And it will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's got everything you need to make a podcast in one place. They even have classes and stuff that you can listen to that will give you all kinds of good tips on what you need to do in order to make the best podcast. So if you want to do this, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, or download the free Anchor app to get started. All right, so I'm going to use this segment to talk more about the BellaDonna Division, which was started this year by Casey Dillon and Veronica Fairchild, who are two amazing people who I've had on the podcast before a couple of months ago, involving Genesis 1, which happened a few months ago. And it's basically the first all-female wrestling promotion in the South, or at least in Alabama. And these two amazing women decided to come together and create this division in Gadsden, Alabama, for the sake of pushing women's wrestling in the South. And I am really honored and privileged to have been a part of the first show, Genesis 1, which had Jazz during her retirement tour, participating in a tag team match with The Woad, and with so many other talented women like Heather Monroe, Raylan, and just so many other talented women like Shalonce Royal, who I just spoke to, and just so many other talented women who are basically pushing for the needle when it comes to women's wrestling and independence. This was my first independent show ever. Like, I had never been to one. I had only been to the amazing, nice, sparkly WWE shows and the live events. I had never really been to a indie show. And this was my first time being at an indie show. And then to be able to participate in one meant the world to me too. So it's just like, man, like, being a part of this show and being in a locker room full of super women who are just able to do these amazing things and fight these people and just be able to do these things was just absolutely amazing. And being able to tell the story of women like Casey Keene, who had just started her wrestling career maybe a couple months ago, and that was her third match ever. And seeing her and Valentina Loca come up together in the Black and Brave Academy and then being on the same show together, that meant a lot to me as well. So you can only imagine my surprise when they asked me to come back and commentate for Genesis 2. Like, I was really excited and just humbled to be a part of it anyway, but now I'm coming back for the second one. So this second one is going to feature major players in women's wrestling, like Renee Michelle, who is the wife of WWE's Drake Maverick and an accomplished wrestler in her own right. I don't know if you may or may not know her, but she was a participant in the Mae Young Classic, and she was also a participant in the whole storyline involving her getting married to Drake Maverick and not being able to consummate her marriage because he was obsessed with winning the 24/7 title away from R-Truth. And she is an amazing wrestler in her own right, and I'm really happy that she is on this card. Plus, it was also just announced 2 days ago that Jordan Grace, who is a former Knockouts champion and Knockouts tag team champion on Impact Wrestling, she's going to be participating in the show too, along with so many others like Shalonce Royal and just so many other women who are the backbone of the women's wrestling movement going on in the indies right now. So if you want to go, please go to the Gadsden Mall. It's going to be at the Gadsden Mall this Saturday, August the 21st. And yes, it's SummerSlam that Saturday as well. But if you have a mind to check out some women's wrestling, please come to our show. Doors open at 6 o'clock. You can buy tickets at www.thebelladonnadivision.com and just check out this wonderful show. We have a great show, lined up for you at the Gadsden Mall, which is home of Spartan Wrestling right now. So please come out and check us out. And we've also have like a BellaDonna Dude show, which is sort of like a pre-show, you could say. Before it as well, we got some great male talent as well. So please come and check that out and come and check out Genesis 2. Let's just continue to support women's wrestling in the South and just women's wrestling as a collective. There's so many great things happening this coming weekend with women's wrestling, with Bianca and Sasha fighting in SummerSlam for the second time for the SmackDown Women's title. Like, you have Jade and Kiera Hogan getting ready to fight each other at Rampage, like in AEW. There are just so many amazing things happening, along with NXT TakeOver 36 happening Sunday as well. So there are just so many amazing things happening in the world of wrestling, in women's wrestling, and plus, not to mention, next weekend, NWA is having their first all-females pay-per-view, Empower, which is executive produced by Mickie James, who is just a legend. So there's just so much beauty going on in women's wrestling. So please support it all if you can. Support your local indies, wherever you are, and just continue to support women's wrestling because it matters and it does sell and it is a draw. So don't let nobody lie to you. But yeah, please come and to the BellaDonna Division's Genesis 2 and at the Gadsden Mall here in Gadsden, Alabama, and just support women's wrestling in the South. All right, so thank you for listening to this episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. More than likely, the show will be back to normal in a little while. I've been crazy busy between preparing for the BellaDonna Division show that's Saturday, and then also doing stuff with Women's Wrestling Talk as well, doing news stuff and panel stuff and so many different things going on with that. And also participating, getting ready to go to St. Louis next weekend. There's just been so much going on. But hopefully at some point the show will actually get back to normal and I'll go back to doing recaps and stuff like that. But I've just been working really hard to create still like some of the best content I can for you guys in terms of interviews and recaps and news stories and stuff like that. So please, if the show has gone into a bit of flux, it's because I've had all of these changes and so many interviews to come in and stuff like that, which I'm really grateful for. But in the meantime, in between time, I'm really just trying to handle the waves of it all. So if it seems like it's not as normal as it used to be, then that's really why. But if you've bared with me through all of that, I'm really grateful for you. So in the meantime, in between time, I hope you enjoy this wrestling weekend we've got. Of course, AEW Rampage is tomorrow. And then we have SmackDown that's tomorrow as well, along with SummerSlam. And Sunday, we have NXT TakeOver 36. And then, of course, we have a new week in wrestling just popping off. And we have to, deal with all the stuff that comes with that. So I hope you're remaining safe and doing everything you possibly can to keep yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally healthy. And I just hope that with all of the opportunities that you have coming forth in your life, or even right now, even if you don't have a lot of opportunities, just know that blessings are always around the corner, and just never give up on yourself. So with that in mind, thank you for listening to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Please follow me on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod, and on Facebook at The Hardy Wrestling Podcast as well. And also follow Women's Wrestling Talk, the show that I help co-host with TK Trinidad and so many other amazing women like Gabby Loren, Katrina Storm, Ella Jackson, and just so many other amazing women who are passionate about wrestling just like I am. Follow Women's Wrestling Talk on Instagram at WW Talk Pod, and also follow us using the same handle on Twitter, and watch us every other Wednesday on Fight TV. My episode with TK Trinidad and Eva Lee's premiered this past Wednesday, so if you hadn't had a chance to look at that, please watch it. I'll greatly appreciate that. That was a huge moment for me because I had never really imagined that for myself. And it happened in such a major way. So thank God and whatever higher power you believe in for that. And just continue to support me, Women's Wrestling Talk, and the Hardy Wrestling Podcast as well. And where you can listen to me anywhere you get your podcasts. And even on my YouTube channel, Hardy Wrestling Podcast. So with that, all that in mind, this is the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl, Stephanie Hardy. And until next time, bye y'all.